This is Freedom Investor Radio, and I'm John Pearl. It hit me like a freight train when I realized there was a better way. When I discovered that I could take my future into my own hands. When I realized I could invest my way to freedom. This is what I'm working towards. In each episode of Freedom Investor Radio, we will explore the tactics and strategies used by the top real estate investors and entrepreneurs in the nation. We will learn how you can start investing your way to freedom and take control of your life. Thanks so much for tuning in. What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of Freedom Investor Radio. I'm your host, John Pearl, and today I'm joined by Yonah Weiss, who is a cost segregation expert with Madison SPECS. Yonah, welcome to the show today.
Good morning, John. It is great to be here. Thanks so much for having me on the show.
Absolutely, Yonah. So I'm super excited to chat with you today. I've been following you for a couple years now, and I'm excited to pick your brain. So if you could just kind of tell us a little bit about yourself and what you're doing now and how you got there, that'd be excellent.
Happy to do so. Yeah, Yonah Weiss. I'm been a teacher for probably about 20 years now. That was my main occupation for about almost 15 years. And about 7 years ago, and that's always been my passion, really, teaching and education and giving back at a nonprofit company that I started to help underprivileged families, people that were going through tough medical and, things that happened in their lives that were difficult situations like the death in the family or illness. But it wasn't really paying the bills. Unfortunately, I had a big family of 6 kids, and it wasn't, teaching, unfortunately, as great and as enthusiastic I am about it. You still need to pay the bills somehow. And so I was looking for something else, maybe do on the side, maybe more full-time. And real estate kept coming up when I was asking friends, like, hey, what should I do? And like, well, you should get into real estate. There's so many opportunities, so many options. And I just started learning bigger pockets and all that kind of stuff. And this was early on. This is about 7 years ago or so. Bigger pockets wasn't as huge and massive as it is today, but made some amazing connections. Had some good friends that helped me out in just kind of showing me the ropes and different things. A really good friend who I basically interned or apprenticed under for about 8-9 months, and he was a commercial mortgage broker at a property management company, was doing, had been in the real estate game for many, many years. And I learned literally everything there was to know. I just remember sitting in his office, and he's like on the phone with the electric company, yeah, one of his tenants, powers got shut off. And I was like, wow, this is fascinating. This is what it's like to deal with tenants and all that kind of stuff. So long story short, not so short, but I about 5 years ago, met up with this company, Madison Commercial Real Estate, Madison SPECS, which is the cost segregation division, largest cost segregation company in the country. And they were looking for someone to help with the business development. And that was something I was interested in. It turns out it has a lot to do with teaching. And that's really what I'm good at. And so that's what I've been doing for the past 5 years or so, just getting on webinars and podcasts like this and just sharing the knowledge.
Yes. So for those that don't know, what is a cost segregation? What does it apply to? How does it work? What are the benefits of it? All of the above.
Yeah, it's a really weird name for an advanced form of depreciation. So cost segregation is essentially, you hear real estate has these tax benefits, right? What is that? It's mostly depreciation, which is a tax deduction. You can literally write off the entire value of your property when you buy an investment or business property, but you can't do it all at once. So they've given this name, depreciation, to this deduction that allows you to write off a little bit every year, as if the property is actually going down in value when it's not. The property is actually probably going up in value, and it's really not intrinsic to the property itself, because you could buy a property built in 100 years ago and start your depreciation schedule of 27 and a half years today when you buy it. And so that's what depreciation is taking a little bit of the value of that property as a tax write-off. Cost segregation allows you to accelerate certain components of the properties, accelerate the depreciation, meaning taking the tax deduction of certain components, sometimes up to 20 to 30% of the value of the property. You can take those deductions upfront in the earlier years. So it's think about borrowing from yourself, borrowing from the potential future deductions that first of all, you may not ever see because you may not own the property for 27 years, et cetera. So that's in a nutshell what cost segregation is. It's a cash flow mechanism, a tax strategy that allows you to pull from these potential deductions instead of waiting and taking a little bit each year.
Got it. And are there certain types of properties where this makes more sense to, perform one of these studies on? Does it make sense for someone to do it on a, single family residence that's worth $250,000 that they just bought last year? Or is it kind of more for the larger commercial stuff? Is there a certain value point to where it makes sense?
Really, any property, it makes sense. I would say even on a $250,000 single family home, it can make sense. Since it is a percentage or a proportion ratio of the property purchase price of how much your tax benefit is going to be. So the higher the purchase price, the more benefit there's going to be. And it does not change the cost in actually getting it done. So from our services, it's not contingent on your tax savings. In a lot of types of tax incentives and things like that, there are companies that will take a percentage of whatever they find you in tax savings, right? Like R&D tax savings, things like that. That's not the case with cost segregation whatsoever, which means it may cost you as the property owner a few $1,000s to get the cost segregation study done, regardless if you bought the property for $200,000 or $20 million. And so the advantage obviously is going to be much more the higher the property value.
Got it. And is there certain types of business plans where it makes more sense? Like if somebody's, got a single family long-term hold versus an Airbnb short-term rental versus a, large commercial syndication, does that play into this at all?
It certainly can. Everyone's situation is going to be different. Everyone's business plan is different, but typically speaking, there's more than the business plan. It has a lot more to do with who the owners are or who the investors are. And so, there's something called a real estate professional status, which means someone who is full-time in real estate. You're able to benefit from these tax deductions more so than anyone else would, meaning regular people or anyone, a W-2 job, whatever it is, your rental income is treated differently than your W-2 income, which means the depreciation is considered a passive deduction, and that can go to offset your passive income. The reason why I'm bringing this up, it has a lot to do with the business plan, because you as an individual, if you can take advantage of those deductions this year, right, then it's probably going to be more beneficial than not, because it's all about time value of money. That's really what this is all about. So if you can use those deductions against not only your passive income, but also your active or W-2 income, that's where it's going to make most sense. In general, even if we're not going down that path of real estate professional, in general, typically speaking, if you hold a property for more than a year or two, this is where it's going to make more sense. Less than that, it's going to make less sense because, and we're throwing out tons of terms over here, but you have something called depreciation recapture tax on the sale of a property, which means the benefit, that time value of money, is going to be much less if you're holding the property for a shorter amount of time.
Got it. And so what Yonah just mentioned with the real estate professional, it's one of the most powerful strategies in real estate investing for married couples, specifically. If you got one of the, say example, the husband is a, high income W-2 earner and
right.
The wife is not currently employed, then she can gain real estate professional status. And there's different ways to do that for different, niches. But I highly recommend anybody do some research on real estate professional status. It's an extremely powerful way to legally lower your taxable income. Anyways, Yonah, at what point would somebody reach out to somebody like you to get a cost segregation study performed? Is that something, you should reach out to you before the property goes on, or, when you're analyzing the numbers, underwriting the property? Is that something that kind of comes after you get the property under contract and have closed on it?
It's certainly something that can be done during the underwriting process. I know a lot of people like to see what the potential tax savings would be done. You don't need to do a full cost segregation study at that point and pay the money. But what we do provide is a free upfront analysis to anyone. And so it is very helpful, especially if you're, have investors and want to share what those tax benefits might be, or just for yourself to have an idea, is this going to make sense for me to do? And so that usually takes us a day or two just to turn around that feasibility analysis, that estimate, so you can see ahead of time. Otherwise, yes, definitely something to get done in the first year, most people like to get it done. Although if you didn't get it done in the first year, it's something you can do really at any point. If you've owned a property for a number of years and never did cost segregation, you can actually get it done and retroactively catch up those depreciation deductions that you missed that you could have taken and get a lump sum this year.
Got it. And is a cost segregation study something that can only be performed once per ownership period?
Per ownership period, yes, it's only one thing that it can only be done once, meaning it's not on the property because, as I said, the depreciation starts over when there's a change of ownership. But if you buy a property, you can do it and it's a one-time thing you've done. The only time where you may get kind of an updated version of a cost seg on a property that you currently own is if you do renovations or you do some major capital improvements. That money spent can be added to your depreciation basis. You can deduct that as well. And sometimes it can be beneficial, especially if it's a large renovation job, to do a cost segregation on that amount as well and add that to your tax study.
Got it. And so you mentioned it more so applies to, or more so matters who the owners and investors are. So let's take a syndication, for example. It's what we talk about a lot on this show. So you've got the general partners who are the ones performing the majority of the work, and then you've got the limited partners who are the passive investors, but everybody's got ownership shares of the deal. Does the cost segregation or the pass-through tax benefits affect the general partners different than it does the limited partners, or does everybody kind of benefit in the same way?
Everyone should benefit in the same way. Generally speaking, when you have a type of partnership like that, and there are some differences of opinion on this, but generally speaking, the tax depreciation deductions will pass through and essentially go equally according to the percentage of ownership. Which means if you have, let's say 70-30 split, or you have 100 investors, whatever it is, everyone's going to get their share, their portion of depreciation. And that's going to show up for them on a tax form called the K-1, which you may have heard. It will show what your profits and what your deductions, meaning your losses, are. And many times you may have, if you do a cost segregation study, you're going to have more losses or more deductions than you even have income, which is going to show up as like a negative number. And that's a good thing. It doesn't mean that you're losing money. It just means that you have this paper loss that you can apply, if not in the current year, to, again, if you're a real estate professional, or your spouse is, to another source of income. You can carry that forward, and that can be used next year or the year after until it's either used up or until you sell the property.
Right. And just to kind of like real world example, just to kind of pull all this together. So example, I invested passively in an apartment building in 2020. They performed a cost segregation study. It was over 100% bonus depreciation. So year one, I invested $50K. So I got my K1. It was over a $50K loss on my year one K1. However, I am a W-2 employee, and the majority of my income comes from my W-2 job, and my wife is not a real estate professional. That's something we're working on. But long story short, all of the passive cash flow I received from the deal that year was tax-free. And if I or my wife was a real estate professional, understand this correctly, all 50,000 of that would have been able to be used as a loss towards my W-2 income, thus lowering my overall taxable income.
Right. Well, first, just to clarify that, it will first always go to hit your passive income bucket, meaning your rental income. So that 50,000 of depreciation, whatever that is going to hit that. And whatever's left over can yes, then be used against your other taxable income if you're your spouse or real estate professional. And what that does is not only it reduces your taxable income, but it actually lowers your adjusted gross income, which can actually be beneficial in many regards. Number one, it may lower you to a lesser tax bracket, which is going to be beneficial overall. It actually may even allow you to have other types of credits or tax deductions because you're reducing your adjusted gross income. So there are benefits all around.
Yeah, this strategy is honestly mind-boggling to me. Once I realized that, what was possible when participating in these kinds of deals, with a cost segregation study, this is why a lot of the wealthiest folks in the world are investing, passively into other folks' syndications who are having cost segregation studies performed, and why a lot of these wealthy folks aren't paying taxes. Well, it's because they're participating in deals that are, doing these types of activities. So extremely powerful stuff. I wanted to talk about kind of the process. So what is actually happening when you or a team member, you get out to the property, then what happens?
Yeah, I mean, what is this cost segregation study, right? We talked about the mechanics of what it does, but what it actually isn't. And so it's an engineer-based study, which means the IRS requires someone with construction or engineering background to analyze a property. And so it's similar to an appraisal where our engineers will come out and take pictures and videos and measurements. And we'll use also appraisal and, a site survey and things really to map out everything so we can get exact numbers. And what we're doing is breaking down the property into its individual components and showing there are certain things, components of the property that depreciate over a 27 and a half year or 39-year schedule. And there are other things, other components that depreciate over a 5-year or 15-year schedule. And what we're doing is identifying what those things are. And there's an entire section of the tax code called the cost recovery system, the MACRS, it's called, the Modified Accelerated Cost Recovery System. And that shows every type of component within a property that actually, depreciate. Some things, we'll say like carpeting or vinyl flooring is over a 5-year schedule. And appliances it's anything that's non-structural. And it can include what we call personal property. That's the category. But really, it's things like appliances or furniture or even, lighting or curtains, window treatments, that kind of stuff, anything that's non-structural. And so there's dozens of categories of what those things are. And our engineers are trained to identify everything in the property, cabinets, countertops, all that stuff, take measurements, and then apply what the value of those individual components are, break it down, and then come back and, it takes us about 6 to 8 weeks or so to create this very detailed report, which will produce a new depreciation schedule based on the findings, meaning what you can hand over to your accountant to show what tax deductions you can take.
Got it. No, that's fascinating stuff. I've always been curious as to how the process actually works behind the scenes. All right, Yonah. So I want to pivot a little bit, and I want to switch over and talk a little bit about LinkedIn. So you are the cost seg king, but in my world, you're the LinkedIn king. You're the LinkedIn king now. So you recently put out you've been doing it for a while. I recently participated in the most recent LinkedIn challenge. It's where you post 10 days and you have a group and you're all interacting with each other. And it really opened my eyes as to how powerful LinkedIn is as far as, networking for business. I think you say it's a 24/7 networking event. And it really is that. So how did, at what point did you realize that you needed to go in on LinkedIn and put more efforts forward, and kind of what was your process like getting more involved and realizing how powerful it is?
Yeah, I really stumbled upon LinkedIn about 5 years ago, again, by accident. And when I did, I saw that it had changed from what it used to be, what I knew it as, what most people did, as a place where you post your resume and kind of connect with old college friends and stuff like that, or other colleagues from previous jobs. And like no one ever really looked at it unless you were looking for a job or you were a recruiter or something. LinkedIn was like this archaic, it wasn't I wouldn't even call it a social media at all. But when Microsoft took it over and really with the intention of creating like a professional type of Facebook is really what it turned into. So it turned into like a lot of content creating. And about 5 years ago, it was really at its infancy of that. And I saw people getting amazing organic reach, creating communities, connecting with people. And I was just curious about it at the time and saw some other people that I knew who were just posting content like videos or inspirational stuff or just educational pieces about things that they knew. And I was like, hey, I could do that. Let's talk about cost segregation. So I literally just, put out like a blurb, hey, this is what cost segregation is. And someone reached out to me and was like, would you like to come on my podcast and talk about cost segregation? And I'm like, what's a podcast? I don't even know what a podcast was. And so at that point, that's really where it just kind of slowly started, trickling down. I came across at that point Gary Vaynerchuk and his, strategies of jab, 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 right hook, and the crush it and crushing, all that stuff, talking about social media marketing. And to me, it all made sense, especially given his approach, which is not the vulgar language, but his approach of just giving and adding value as much as possible. And that really spoke to me because that's really what I do. That's kind of my nature. So that's what I did. I just started posting every day And I made a challenge for myself at that point of a 30-day challenge to post. Well, not on the weekend necessarily, but every single day. And just it trained me at that point just to learn how to write a little better and put my thoughts out there in a coherent way and learn and kind of you learn from A/B testing kind of stuff, what works, what doesn't work, what people are engaging with, what they're not. And then you create a following, create a community. And so little by little, that's what I was doing. Got on a lot of podcasts, started my own podcast at one point, and it was taking off over and over again. I was like, hey, I've gotten so much out of this platform, creating a brand, creating a name where if you say cost segregation, you automatically think of Yonah Weiss. It's synonymous to a lot of people. And, thank God that's a testament to just the consistency of being out there and putting yourself out there and kind of attaching that brand to your name. And I was like, hey, I've gotten so much out of this platform in terms of business, in terms of relationships and connections and so many opportunities. I just want to give back. And so that's why I started this 10-day challenge where I want to encourage other people who, number one, may be afraid or just not used to LinkedIn as a platform and how to use it properly to create original content, engaging content, and create a community of people that you can interact with. And it's really a way to give back. So that's why I started it. And I've done it probably once a quarter for about 2 years now or so. And it's been incredible.
Yeah, it's great. I really enjoyed the process. It's a lot of work to do it right. And it does take a lot of time. But the thing I noticed about, when you are spending lots of time on LinkedIn, the LinkedIn social media platform versus other social media platforms, you don't leave your scroll session just feeling like, brainless, like you do like on Instagram or Facebook or something. You're actually reading and taking in valuable content. Most of the folks on LinkedIn are, putting out valuable stuff, personal development or, something that you may be interested, real estate investing, or, learning a skill of learning a different niche of real estate investing, something like that. But the thing I found really interesting was, and I found myself doing this too, like we all have our group chat room, and some of the folks are, getting mad because not everybody's liking everybody else's stuff or commenting. And, I think you and one of the other members commented, like, that's not where the value comes in. The value comes in, not relying on your group, but you learn by reading other people's posts. You learn what is valuable and you learn how to create valuable content that will get reactions, not relying on your little group that you're in. So that was a big eye opener for me. And,
absolutely.
In your opinion, what is the main difference between something like LinkedIn versus an Instagram or Facebook or, Twitter, something like that, as far as like what should be posted and what should be shared and, etiquette, things like that?
Sure. I mean, they're all good. And I've heard, success stories from people who are great on every platform out there. And there are people like Gary Vee who will say you have to do everything and be on every platform. And there are others that say, no, strategically pick one platform, learn how it works, use it the best you can, and, and then maybe branch out to others. And so I think one thing, and LinkedIn has changed a lot over the years and continuously kind of changes. They're always adding different features and different things that work with the algorithm that don't work. But one thing that I found is storytelling works probably the best, and long form text, not like blog articles per se. That's an option you can do as well on LinkedIn to create an article, but just a regular post where you're doing long form text. Similar to like Twitter threads, if you will, like that kind of thing, but much longer, where you're sharing, an idea or a story and it's broken down piece by piece. It engages the audience. It actually makes people think and want to react and respond. And so ask questions or what have you. And that creates conversations in the comments. And that's really what it's about. It's creating these conversations, creating communities, interactions between people. And it's not just about putting out content that will go viral, people will see, or whatever it is. Because again, it's really more than anything. I see LinkedIn as a business networking event that's just online. And it's a 24/7, right? Which means you can be there all the time, every day, and still get stuff out of it because there are millions and millions, tens and hundreds of millions of people on there, but still millions of people within your target audience or your market. And so the more you're out there and the more you're networking and getting to know people, the more you can give back, the more you can add value, and the more you can create that brand for people to find you. And so, again, there's so many different types of posts, videos, text, all things that do work. But from what I've found, like I said, the long form text actually has the best effect differently than other types of platforms.
Yeah, that's the thing the difference I noticed with LinkedIn is, if there's so many little ways that you can be seen and, get the message you're trying to put out across. You comment on other people's stuff. A lot of people in your network will see it. You like other people's stuff. Your whole network sees it. A lot of their network's going to see it. So a lot of ways to add value. The more you're on there, the more you're going to be seen, the more, you're going to become familiar with the folks you're trying to reach. But it does take a lot of time. How much time a day are you spending on LinkedIn? Because I'm spending a lot more these days on LinkedIn, and I'm getting a lot of value out of it. I'm learning and I'm trying to help spread the message that I believe in of, creating a life of freedom and control through real estate. So how much time should people be spending on LinkedIn if they're really trying to make the most of it?
It really depends. I would, at the beginning, I wouldn't go in and just spend all your time. Obviously, people, hopefully you have a job, hope you have something to do, right? Besides that, but at a certain point, depending on what your goal is and what you're trying to get out of the platform, at a certain point, the more time and effort and energy you put into it, the more you're going to get out. And so at a certain point, it doesn't really matter how much time you're spending there, depending if you have other work, you have other people working for you and things like that can do the things that maybe you were doing beforehand. What I did, I started out just, maybe, I don't know, half an hour a day or something like that, just strategically creating a post, trying to engage with it, and finding a few other posts that I can write engaging comments on. That's a really important point. You mentioned that as well. Something I'm very big on is trying to engage meaningfully with other content. It can help the other person, but it also gets your name out there as well. People will see you. And so doing that strategically can help grow your network. And for me, I'm getting business requests every day, like multiple times in LinkedIn messages or on comments and things like that. So the more I'm commenting, the more I'm there, the more the business is actually coming in through that, which means to me, it's not a matter of how much time, it's more a matter of all the other things that I need to do for the business, whatever that is, emails, phone calls, meetings, et cetera, whatever that is that being taken care of? And whatever extra time there is, I'm spending on social media. I'm putting in the efforts there because I see the fruit of the labors.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we all have our obligations, but like you, I'm spending more of my free time. I'm just seeing how valuable it is to get out there and engage. It really is just a 24/7 business networking event. So it's awesome. So while we're on the topic of, kind of time management and stuff, what's a typical day for you look like? As a busy, I guess we would consider you an intrapreneur, kind of, you work within your company, but you've got a lot going on. How do you manage your time, stay on task, keep up with everything you got going on? You got any tips and tricks?
Well, I have, Calendly is extremely helpful for me. So whatever's on my calendar, that's what I'm doing. So my calendar gets pretty full a couple of weeks in advance, usually with podcasts. And I'm doing usually at least one podcast a day. That's really been my schedule, whether my own, the Weiss Advice podcast where I'm interviewing people, or being a guest like on the Freedom Investor Radio, right? It's just fulfilling to me. I enjoy it. It's a great thing. If I could do this all day long, I probably would. Right. If there was a way for me to get paid and do podcasting all day, I'd probably do that, to be honest. And I have, free consultations with people answering questions and stuff throughout the day. And otherwise, I have emails, a lot going on with our business incoming requests, and then spending the rest of it in the workday on social media, whether it's posting, engaging, commenting, interacting, messaging, et cetera. I'm also on Instagram and Facebook, and Bizfluence is my new favorite one. It's a new platform that's kind of taken off. A friend of mine started it, kind of a new one. You can check that out. But, there's a lot going on.
Yeah, absolutely. So I like to talk about, the influence that other people have had on, your life. How has, mentorship or coaching, has that played a role in your journey thus far? I know, we talked about networking, LinkedIn, that's obviously a huge part of this. But what about coaching and mentorship? Has that played a part in your life at all?
Absolutely. It certainly has. I mean, for many years before I had gotten into business, into the real estate, I was very close with a mentor, a rabbi, someone who was very close with. Literally spent every day with him and apprenticed him for at least 10 years, literally every day. And so that to me was a great example of just having that relationship with someone who is much older than you, much wiser, and just learning, becoming the best person you can be. And then when I got into real estate, the same thing applied. I found other people. I found people who had been in the business for 20, 30 years, and just asked them questions, spend time with them. I've had some formal coaches and mentors at times, been in masterminds and groups like that, and it's extremely beneficial. I mean, I cannot speak to the value of having a coach, having a mentor, having someone guide you who is much more experienced than you.
Right. Yeah, totally agree. So you mentioned, we've been talking about real estate investing kind of indirectly through cost segs, but understand you do some real estate investing yourself, and you're kind of getting more involved these days. What are your favorite asset classes to invest in, and why do you like them?
I've been in, passively investing. I did some fix and flips early on. Was not really for me. Just the involvement of it was too much for me at that time. But I see the value in so many different areas of real estate. So there's not really one asset class that I'm focused on. I've invested in multifamily, in self-storage, mobile home parks, RV parks recently, and a couple of those. And I just see the value in, if the operators are good and they have experience and the numbers really speak for themselves, you can find a good deal in any type of market, in any type of environment. You just have to, get good at it, right? One other thing that I am actually very interested in, and I've been saying this for a while and still haven't pulled the trigger, is short-term rentals. So that's something I'm actually in the process of, learning and getting that business kind of set up to purchase one, and then just jump into the Airbnb platform.
Yeah, I'm also super interested in the short-term rental space. It's very intriguing. A lot of good things going on. You mentioned passively investing in some deals, and the thing I love the most about that, and you hit the nail right on the head. You find some quality operators. It's all about the people who are running the deal, but that's why passive investing is so powerful. You expand your network, you build relationships with folks that you trust, and you do your homework on them, and then they're putting all these deals together, and over time you can really diversify just within real estate. You can have an extremely diverse portfolio strictly from real estate investing. It's all passive. You're not doing any of the work. That's what I love. It's extremely powerful. But Yonah, one more question. Got time for one more. It's a question I ask all of my guests. I touched on it a little bit earlier. I work at a nuclear power plant here on the central coast of California that's shutting down in 2025. As of now, there's some talk on the table of keeping it open. But what would your one piece of advice be for folks who are looking to create more freedom and control over their lives through, real estate investing, entrepreneurship, whatever it might be?
I would say continue education. That's the biggest thing for me. It always has been. Again, as a teacher, maybe I'm a little biased, but I see the more that you learn, the more you learn that you know nothing, right? And the more there is to learn, and how little you actually know. And so you can go deep into anything. But what's amazing is, just like we're talking about cost segregation here, and I'm sure there's some people listening to this that this is the first time you ever heard of this, or maybe you did hear of this once or whatever, and you're like really intrigued, like, I'd love to hear more about this cost segregation thing. There are dozens of things like this that you've never heard of that can be a game changer in your life, in your business, but you'll never know about it unless you actually spend the time to listen to podcasts, to go to courses, learn from other people who are more successful than you. And so be humble. That's really the number one key in learning, I think, is never to think that you know enough. Always be searching for and thirsting for more knowledge.
Yeah, absolutely. You just keep learning. And if you surround yourself with people who are, already doing it, you learn, you meet people, and it really expands your mindset, and you realize that, hey, maybe there is more possible that I can do, and maybe there is a better way of living. So yeah, I couldn't agree more on that. All right, Yonah, if people wanted to connect or find out more about what you're doing, where should they go?
Well, I would venture to say they'll probably hit me up on LinkedIn if you haven't yet. make sure if you do to send me a connection request, leave a little message. Let me know that you heard me here on the Freedom Investor Radio. Otherwise, you can go to yonahweiss.com to learn more about whatever else I'm up to.
Yeah, absolutely. And for anybody who is, in business, anybody at all, I would definitely recommend connect with Yonah on LinkedIn, get involved in the next challenge. It's an eye opener. I really enjoyed it. Also really enjoyed this conversation. It's been a pleasure chatting. So thanks so much for your time. Ladies and gentlemen, Yonah Weiss. Thank you for listening to Freedom Investor Radio. If you like what you heard, make sure to rate, review, subscribe, and share with a friend. Thanks again for listening.